don't know if you've been to any of our other art talks. This is our final one of the year. We've done one every month since March. And basically the theme that I've curated is artists who are interdisciplinary. So they work across art forms. They're not just in one medium or media. They cross over. And that fluidity, I think, is really interesting now in contemporary art practice. So we've had filmmakers, we've had musicians, we've had composers, we've had gardeners, all who have these other mediums that they work in. And I thought it would be very apt to actually have Diana right at the end, because Diana, as some of you might know, is one of our most sort of famous local artists. And has been doing what she's been doing for a long time in many different ways, but the one that a lot of us know is Miss Smith. We've all met her, and if we haven't met her, we've read about her or we've seen images. And so Diana is going to end this season of talks, and I'd just like to say that I'm very glad that you're here. And I'm going to be popping in and out because we're having to share the front desk. So enjoy and think about any questions or answers or questions that you have at the end, because we're definitely going to have that, because I think there are going to be lots of things to talk about. So, Diana, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. It's really nice to see a full house here. When I was younger, when I was at school, when I reached the age of 11, I was good at languages, and I went to a rather academic school, so I was told to do languages, which meant I couldn't do art. And they didn't really want me to do art because I couldn't colour in my balloons evenly. So I left school and I went to university and studied drama and French. It was quite an academic course. I was into theatre, I was into drama, and I was into improvisation, and I'm still into improvisation in all the art forms that I seem to follow. And according to tradition, this talk is also pretty much improvised. I did run it through with one friend, and it lasted exactly 50 minutes, so we're hopeful. So after university, I met a friend who'd done an art therapy training at Goldsmiths College, and it interested me. It was a postgraduate art therapy course. And so I applied, and in order to do it, I had to get a portfolio of pictures together, which I'd never done. So I painted a bunch of pictures, and me and a friend who'd both done this drama course got in. So I did the year's art therapy training. It was a Jungian-based art therapy course at Goldsmiths College, and I can't really remember that much about what I learnt, but what I learnt is that doing art is therapeutic, that art is therapy, and that is my motto: creativity for survival, and without it I would be lost. So, and for many years I worked with adults with learning difficulties as an art therapist, so it was a good way of earning some money as well. And eventually I ended up running my own printmaking courses, and in lots of ways I think they were a therapeutic process for a lot of people. People came on my courses who hadn't done any art since school. And the art therapy course that I did was full of people who were qualified artists who'd done fine art degrees, which had messed them up in the process, it seems, so they needed the art therapy course. Whereas I had a chip on my shoulder because I hadn't done an art degree, but in some ways I found it easier to play, and there was a lot of play with art that went on in the art therapy course. So what brought me to Glastonbury was I got involved in a community. We were living near Monmouth, and my friends were a children's theatre group. So I joined the children's theatre group, which was called Natural Magic, and we got a year's contract to come to Glastonbury and work with children with learning disabilities. It was a year's contract as a theatre group. So Natural Magic came to Glastonbury, and I had nowhere to live. And I went to Greenham Common with some friends and met a woman there, and the next day I went and knocked on her door and I said, if I become your cleaning lady, will you give me a room? And she said yes. And that was Bron Bradshaw, who many of you know, and we formed a community of artists and musicians for several years. And because I was living there, I got into doing a bit of etching. So that's my first picture. That was Bron's. It's very much enlarged. It's actually a tiny picture, so it looks very distorted, so big like that. But it was the workshop window in Bron's studio, and that was one of her old presses. It was a medium that didn't really suit me. It's, for a start, it's back to front, like lino. Everything's back to front. You print it back to front. I couldn't get my head around that. But I did quite a lot of etchings, and I haven't really got copies of any of them left. But this one is called Grieving, and another thank you to Bron, because after my mother died, I couldn't work, I couldn't paint, I was blocked, it was an artist block. And by doing this etching, which is called Grieving, which was about the process that I was going through, losing my mother, who died very suddenly while having a heart operation. So the act of actually creating this picture really helped me get through, and I feel like, again, for me, painting, printmaking, whatever, it's a very therapeutic experience. But also in the 80s, I went to an Oak Dragon camp, and those of you who know about Oak Dragon camps, it was a weird one. There was like loads of disputes going on between all the people who were, all the facilitators. They were having a big row thing going on. It was a creative arts camp. And the only thing I could find to do, there was one woman in a field and it was pouring with rain, and she was under a big umbrella, and she was getting people to make paper cutouts and screen print onto t-shirts. And so I did that because it was the only thing available. And that woman, I then met her years later. She came into my kitchen. When at the camp, she had a little 2-year-old holding onto her skirt, trying to distract her. And the next time I saw her, she walked into my kitchen with an 8-year-old. This is Ramona Belcher. And I said, you were the person who inspired me to get involved in screen printing. And so first, this is my daughter here. So in her primary school, I went and got the kids to do very simple prints, just using newsprint and cutting the image out in the newsprint and then printing. Very, very simple activity. But I went on to do screen printing. I moved to Bristol for a while, and I went on and did some screen printing in Queen's Road. It's a college in Bristol where you can do day courses. And not sure what the next picture is. And I got so engrossed in the screen printing process that I actually bought 8 old screens that the college were throwing out, and I ended up running simple screen printing courses for 15 years, workshops. So this is Corinne, another local friend, and she's doing a screen print with this particular process that I got involved in. It's very painterly, so it's the nearest to doing a painting. What you do is you've got no stencils, you paint your image onto the screen, you fill the screen with paint, which has been mixed with a medium which retards the drying time, and then you pull the screen through and produce a print. So there's her print, and you're left with a ghost image on the screen, which is also quite interesting because you can ink it up again, and you can do another copy. They're never the same, but you can also change it. I mean, I had people who they put a bird in the first copy, and then they decide, no, I don't want the bird, so they wouldn't have it in the next image. Or there were other things you could do. You could ink that up again with just the medium, and you'd end up with a very, very pastel version of your picture. It was all sorts of possibilities with this particular process that I taught weekend workshops. I'd make a big vat of soup, they'd bring some other things to eat, and we'd have these wonderful weekend workshops that went on for 15 years. And I think I had a lot of people come on them who were frightened to do paintings. I think I was the same. There was something about having the screen in between you and your piece of paper. You never looked at the blank piece of paper. You worked directly onto the screen. And there were happy accidents, like if you look in the background, that blue picture, that was somebody who'd scrumpled up a piece of newsprint, put it underneath the screen and printed it. And also you could let your picture dry and then overprint it. And you could block out areas you didn't want to overprint. It was so versatile. I've given up using that process now because ecologically it ain't that great. So you're mixing, obviously you put all your different colours on the screen, but then when you print you're left with mud. I mean, mud colour is quite useful at some occasions, but all the colours get mixed together. In traditional screen printing, either photographic or with just paper stencils, you print each colour separately, and so you scoop up the leftover and you've got a nice clean paint you can use again. So in the end I decided that it was too messy, so I moved on to other things, and I moved on to doing photographic screen printing as well. This picture in the corner was something that a woman did when I was doing workshops with newspaper stencils, and we were at a camp, a rainbow camp, and this woman literally cut out, she took away a scalpel and a piece of newsprint and a board, and she wrote, "May the land be pure without roughness of thorns." She printed all that. I mean, it's amazing what you can do just with a piece of newsprint and a knife. Oh, this looks weird. This is another grieving picture, which is done with that particular method of screen printing. This was the same method as well, but the woman and the dancer was collaged on top of a screen print done. We call it screen monoprinting, or screen painting actually, because it's so like painting. These pictures are blown up very big, and they weren't that big originally. But I've shown you this one because the lines, I was in this class in Bristol, and we evolved a way of being able to do lines because the paint was very gloopy. It was like you mix the paint and the medium and you can't get much accuracy. So a woman came in with a hair dye bottle with a long nozzle, and we put the paint into those, and then you could actually do lines with this method. That's one of my workshops years ago, just to show what it looked like when I was in Bristol. And everyone would get excited when at the moment of creating a print. So this is actually a print that I did. It looks really weird, it's big. I won a prize at the Royal West of England Academy for this print. It's an Italian cleaning lady. But I put it in to show you that here I used the monoprinting method and also photographic screen printing. So I would do a background with the monoprinting method and then use a photographic stencil, which was for the railings and the details, and combine the two. Now we're on to Miss Smith. So the first Miss Smith pictures that I did were with this particular, actually most of my pictures are screen monoprints of Miss Smith. And Miss Smith I was just messing about and doodling, and I think that was a blotted image that I'd created. So that's Miss Smith appears out of the blue. Where she came from, I don't know. People are always asking me. I was just doodling, and this figure appeared, and she appealed to me, and I thought I'd keep going with her. So this was the first image that I did. She's standing at the bus stop, and she's been touched by an angel, and something's going to happen because of it. The angel is really a part of herself, if you like. So it's the positive part of herself, the part of herself that believes in magic. And things started to happen. So she has a dream, and she dreams that she's going flying. And this picture always amazes me because I painted it 3 weeks before my mum died very suddenly. And I always thought it was a premonition of my mother flying off to be with the angels. And also my mum, by the time I got there, she had actually passed. But she looked a bit like the way Miss Smith looks in that picture. So her adventures carried on. Oh, this is very bleached out. But this was a screen monoprint, which I then washed over with a milky sort of solution because I wanted it to be quite foggy and hazy. It was inspired by Where's Wally? This one, again, screen monoprint. It's called, it says Handle with Care. Yeah, was the title of this image, of this picture. And I wasn't sure whether Miss Smith had just handed the heart to the angel or if the angel was about to hand it to Miss Smith, and I quite like the ambiguity of that. Oh my God, the background to this picture is red. It's pink. Pink, it's pink, deep pink.
Sorry, everyone.
What's happened to the colours?
It's on the screen. It's the right colour. I'm sorry, I'm not sure
That's really
why
weird.
there's a translation going on here. It's a really lovely bright
So this
pinky
is
red.
Yeah, really shocking. It's really shocking. The title of this is, now don't you worry, Miss Smith, the goddess comes in all shapes and sizes. So we've got the a little image of the Venus of Willendorf in the background, and that's a completely photographic image. So the background was probably monoprinted. I'm not sure. So the colours were done separately. Does anybody want to know how you do photographic screen prints? Do we want to go into that? Maybe I could do that later. Somebody can ask me that question because I don't know if I'll have to have time for it. It's quite complicated, isn't it, Kim?
There's a few steps in the process yet.
You coat your screen with a photographic emulsion, and then you take a black and white image and you put it underneath the screen and you expose it to ultraviolet light. And where you have drawn black, you coat the screen, and where you have drawn black, when you wash the screen out, the emulsion will wash away, so you're left with a gap, and that's the bit that prints. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense.
What I'd like to say about Miss Smith is this, and I put this in my book. I've got my complete works of Miss Smith out there for sale. She is all about lightening one's load and a love of beauty. There is wisdom in her ways. She helps me to seek out the positive. She looks at life with humour and a belief in magic. And she's a champion of various things. She's a champion of the heart, as shown with that picture with them sharing the heart. She's also a champion of justice, which this picture was about. So it was about, I can't remember what the caption is, but I had just been to Greece to work with refugees.
No borders.
Yeah.
No
borders, no barriers. Oh, to be free as a bird. And I was inspired because I'd been off to Lesbos and worked with refugees for 3 weeks, and came back. And when I saw the starlings, I thought, why can't we be like birds? Why can't we have that freedom to be wherever we want to be? So Miss Smith is a champion of the heart, of justice, of healing. So this is this was an etching done on perspex. So you can actually do what I call a poor man's etching, which is you literally scratch on a piece of perspex, then you wipe the ink onto it and then wipe it off, and put it through a press, and you've got an instant print. So a woman came and bought the card, and she told me this whole story, how she'd been to Chalice Well, and then her card broken down, and then she came back to it and she put her hands on it and poured some water on it, and then it started again. And she's also a champion for humour. And didn't really realise when I created Miss Smith, but she's quite a familiar archetype, and you see Miss Smiths walking down the high street with the shopping trolley and all that kind of thing. And people will say to me things like, "Oh, you're looking a bit Miss Smith today." I don't usually like that. I know what they mean. It's a stock phrase now. I also was inspired by various paintings, various artists. I did a Miss Smith meets William Blake. This is Miss Smith gets absorbed by Rothko. And it was inspired by, there's a room in the Tate Gallery which has got about 4 huge maroon coloured Rothko paintings, and I went in there and the feeling is you get sort of swallowed up, which is where the idea for this came from. So I suppose talking about subjects with Miss Smith, often the pictures are about adventures that I've had myself, or experiences, nearly always experiences that I've had myself, and about my love of nature and a love of beauty. And when I discovered Miss Smith, I realised I found my own territory, and artistically, everybody paints landscapes and stuff, but this was something that was just mine. No one can paint Miss Smith like as good as me, because I'm the only person who can paint Miss Smith. So which felt nice. It felt something that was particularly mine. And this is from an exhibition that I had in Chalice Hill House one year, and I decided I wanted to make an effigy of Miss Smith. I bought the coat in a charity shop and screen printed the spots on it, and the hat was given to me by Nutana Pa, if anybody remembers her, and I dyed it to be the right colour and made these cardboard cutouts. And another year I made Miss Smith out of chicken wire, and again the exhibition was up at Chalice Hill House, and I drove this chicken wire sculpture, put it in the passenger seat, drove it up there and sat her in a chair. And every day when I went to open the exhibition, I'd sort of be taken aback thinking there was someone there. It was really funny. One year I went to the Glastonbury Festival. We used to paint murals and paint big banners and get our tickets to the festival that way. And that year that's how I got my ticket. But I thought, I'm going to be bored if I just wander around the festival. I think I'll dress up as Miss Smith. And as I was wandering round, I bumped into Rick the Vic, who was quite famous. Is he still with us? Do you know? I'm not sure. I think he might have passed away. He was a real-time vicar, but he also used to do these kind of spoof sermons that were very entertaining. Anyway, I bumped into him and we wandered around the whole festival together, and there was somebody who was taking photographs of people, and there's a book called Glastonbury, and I'm in it with Rick the Vic. Which led to me wanting to, what happened was, I used to have exhibitions of Miss Smith, often at Somerset Arts Week, and I'd made the coat and hat, so I'd hang them in the exhibition. Then of course one day, it just happened, I put them on. And for years I said I wanted to do a one-woman show before I was 70. And I did it. I actually achieved that. And I was invited to do it at the Festival of Death and Dying. And Miss Smith's become a bit of a death comedian now, which was like, of all the subjects to choose to kind of try and do comedy about, death, it's ridiculous. But anyway, this is one of the pictures and screen prints that I did, and here she is on the stairway to the stars, and she's sort of heading that direction, and she looks quite cheerful about it. And I was a little bit worried that I'd killed her off at that point and I wouldn't be able to bring her back. So then I haven't got the picture with me, but the next image that I painted was Miss Smith is touched again. And she's touched by the hand of God that comes down and touches her, and then she can keep on trucking. I'm not ready to kill her off yet. That was part of the show, there I am. And with my Little Miss Smith, which was made by my daughter many years ago, She felted it and it made me cry. And a friend needle pointed her angel. So they appeared in the show as well. This might need an explanation. Well, the first time I did a striptease as Miss Smith, didn't go much further. It goes a bit further. Actually, the next stage is a little bit naughty, but not beyond the leotard. I printed the spots on the leotard, and Catherine gave me these marvellous things for her breasts,
Amazing.
which I stuck on. The idea for Miss Smith to strip down a bit first came when some of you might have seen an exhibition that Megan Players did in the Zigzag building of 500 life-size naked paintings on paper hanging from the ceiling. And Catherine here decided to have an entertainments evening where people would do little cameo performances. So Miss Smith was invited, and Miss Smith decided that she felt a little overdressed, considering the population that was in the Zigzag building. So she did a little performance, and in her handbag she brought out the Venus of Willendorf, which I'd made a little model of, and also a shenanigan which I made, just to prove the point that nakedness was quite okay, quite PC. And she stripped down to a little bit further than this. Say no more. Now this is very interesting because this image hangs in the chalice well, and I thought, somebody said to me, "Oh, have you got a Miss Smith picture in the Chalice Well Retreat House?" I said no, and the caption that goes with this picture is "Old lady with," this is what the artist wrote, "Old lady with dog. I thought I must paint her going forward to her real home, into the light with her dog. Through the doorway is peace at last. She knows no change in the way she walks. Her heart smiles quietly." Well, I thought, that's so Miss Smith. It's just extraordinary. So I wrote to the artist. The artist was a spiritual painter called Ken Evans. I don't know if anyone's ever come across him. And he had died, but his widow wrote back to me. I wrote to ask if he'd ever done any other paintings of this particular figure, but he hadn't. But you can understand why I thought it looked a bit like Miss Smith. Okay, so I don't just do Miss Smith, and that's an abstract painting that hangs in my. So I started painting, which I think printmaking was always a way of. I don't think I dare do a painting. There was something about tackling painting. But a few years ago, we had a marvellous community centre in Glastonbury called the Phoenix that was started by a dear friend, Liz Beach. And she used to run artist meditation classes, and we did all sorts of things. And I had lots of big pieces of paper, so that was one of my early acrylic paintings. They look so awful. The colours are so bad. It's a pity because colour is my passion actually, and they don't look like that. Oh,
I'm going to put these images on our website with the video of the talk, so if anybody would like to see them all in their original colours, there'll be images on the blog, okay?
so that's a painting of Monument Valley. In 2016, I went on a girls' adventure. 6 of us went off to Arizona and had an extraordinary experience, and I came back and I did quite a lot of paintings. They're oil paintings, so I started painting in oils, and that's Sedona again. And this is, I put this one in because it's a painting I'm quite fond of. It's very personal, so I didn't just do landscapes, I started to do things that were more personal. And it's actually about the journey of me and my daughter. People think that's Miss Smith, but it's not. It's me really. And the dresses represent my daughter growing up and becoming an adolescent. And the woman was someone who helped me bring her up. And the leaves are about the daughter leaving home and going off on her own journey. When I went to India, I came back and I was very struck by the women the flowers and the patterns. And I created some wall hangings which were about that sort of size. And then screen printed. I just screen printed lots of separate different bits of fabric with no idea as to how I was going to assemble them. And then had all these bits and laid them all out on my big kitchen table and played with them, which was really fun, to create these wall hangings. That's a close-up of one of them. That's the Lady Water Bearer. The other one was the Lady of the Lotus. And they were all of different women. Then there was the Lady of the Moment, had a mobile in her hand. I was helped by Faye Chadburn. Faye did some of this with me, printing the patterns. It was good fun. This is another phase of my life where I like to change. I like to work in a new medium to infuse me. So I decided to, again it was for Somerset Art Week, and I decided to start doing little paintings on wood. So that is only about that size. And it was a good idea. I sold lots of them. They were oil paintings on wood, and these days people don't have much space in their houses. It's great, you know. You can sell a little tiny painting because people will like it, and people have got space for it. And they were all landscapes of the area in Butley, around where I was exhibiting. And a couple of years after that, I did some more little wood paintings, but of more sort of close-ups of things. I had to take down my magnolia tree, which was very, very stressful and very upsetting. So I did loads of paintings of these or of my magnolia tree as a sort of in memory of, because I was very sad that it had to come down. It was too big a tree for the place that it had been planted, and I have now planted an Amelanchier lamarckii instead. A lovely little tree. So they were fun to do. But I've always wanted to, there's the performer in me, and I got to the point where I wanted my images to move. And so I decided I like to have projects, big projects. So I decided one year that I like to set myself rules. So I said, right, I'm going to paint on this big 5-foot square canvas, and I'm going to discover what's going on in my unconscious. So I'm going to go to this canvas once a week, and I'm going to paint whatever comes into my head. And this started me on these moving paintings that I started to do. So I was painting in acrylics on the big canvas, and 2 other women that I was working with, they decided to do the same project. Our finished work was completely different, but the finished painting has got 600 images underneath it. So what was great about it was that I had to keep going all the time. So I never was creating a finished painting. So I didn't have to worry about how will the finished painting look, because there was always the next bit. But the downside is you only end up with one painting at the end, but you end up with movies. So these are,
You ready for the movie?
This is where one of the, I've done several moving paintings, and when I got to this point I thought, I like that, I'm going to keep that. So then I had to start another moving painting. Yeah, I'm ready for
Ready for the video? Okay.
Oh, sorry, it doesn't.
It's alright, I'll do it.
Oh.
Unfold?
Yeah. So this was the first one, it's called Unfold, and I wrote my own music to go with it a couple of years after. You got sound? Yeah. This is just the very beginning. the light off. Just behind your head, right hand side. Thank you. You have the next one?
Yep.
This is a different one, done a few years later. This is called To Wander Freely. It's got a bit more narrative in it. And there's one more. So these movies are completely unedited. So I've got no idea when I'm standing in front of the canvas what I'm going to do next. It's a real challenge. I do set myself quite difficult challenges, but something always comes up in the end. But all the bits, the moments where I was unsure about what to do next, they're all in the movie as well. And I wanted things to move, so it's a very sort of naive form of animation, because the first time I painted a fish on the canvas, and I wanted the fish to swim off the canvas, so I had to paint it out, paint it again, paint it out, and then it swam off the canvas. So I got sort of slightly seduced by animation. I don't think I'd ever have the patience to do actual animation. This isn't. That's just they're both extracts from several movies. There's two of them actually on YouTube, and I've put some little pieces of paper outside if people want to watch. The Unfold movie is about 19 minutes long, and I'm not quite sure how long they all are. This was just, I don't know why this appeared at the beginning. This is a still from one of the movies. So I did an abstract movie just with abstract painting, and I got to a point where I wanted to keep it, so I had to stop the movie. Okay, so we've got to vastly moving on. More recently, in 2018, I came up with an idea of a project that I wanted to paint portraits of all my favourite people in the world. I was going to paint 70 portraits for my 70th birthday, but I got so into the project, I got completely carried away. I painted 100 portraits, and then we had lockdown, and so I couldn't exhibit them for my 70th birthday. For my 72nd birthday, I was able to exhibit them, and I had a big exhibition. I had a big party in the Red Brick Building, and then I had them here for a week on the walls here, and it was the most fantastic project, mainly because I love people, and I'd come up with a way of working and having some company, which is why I like the music group that I play. I play in a sort of chamber music group, and we write our own music. But and this was my friend Fane, and somebody said, "Oh, that looks so like her," which gave me the encouragement to do these portraits. And the reason I put this here, and for those of you who are artists, you might be quite interested in it, I've got some copies of it to give away, is what I learnt from this project of doing these portraits was so extraordinary. Forget learning to do portraits. What I learnt was to push aside my inner critic, which is this nasty crow that sits on my shoulder and says, "That's not good enough." I didn't have time to engage with that character. That character was out the window, and I just got on with the job of looking at the person and doing the portrait. These are 10 rules written by Sister Carita Kent, who was an artist in the 1920s who did sort of pop art. Rule number 8, which is the one I want to draw your attention to: don't try to create and analyse at the same time. They're different processes. And that was really helpful for me in this portrait thing. That's Fane's mother, who is no longer with us, Jill. And actually, I did 3 portraits of various people. Denny, our mayor, of people who are actually no longer with us, but I recorded them with the portraits, so that was nice too. Lydia, some of you know Lydia. It was a great project, I really enjoyed it. People were asked to bring their own backdrops and so on. I couldn't exhibit them for my 70th birthday, so on my 70th birthday I put them all up in my garden and I put it up on Facebook. But then later on this year I had the exhibition here. And when I gave the people in my choir their portraits, somebody suddenly had the idea to put them on, which was rather fun. Moving swiftly on, iPad drawings. Years ago, I got an iPad and I started doing iPad drawings. This was one of the very first ones. In a couple of minutes, you can just get an idea across, which I liked. I didn't have a fine pen. I just had a pen with a little blob on it, half the size of my little finger. And I liked that because it had a pressure. Now I've got a proper pen. I don't find it so easy. That was an early one of trees. But then during lockdown, I started doing Miss Smith pictures, and I post them on Facebook every day, and I've got postcard books of them, lockdown 1, 2 and 3. This was called Morning Tweet, and I actually turned it into a GIF. You know where it moves? That's something about bubbles, I can't remember, something about celebrating my bubble, I'm in my bubble or something. This one where half of it's bleached out, but just to show you that you can actually do iPad drawings, you can work so it looks like a watercolour. You can actually get the quality of the watercolour, the whole background has been completely washed out. And this is a combination of Miss Smith, the portraits, and the iPad drawing. It's an iPad drawing of Miss Smith looking at all the portraits in a rather exclusive gallery with the Mona Lisa next door. And this is the latest Miss Smith that I've done. I've just become a granny. So it's called Wonders Never Cease. And then just breezing through some of my hobbies, ceramics. And that is something I did this year. That's a knitted bowl. Machine knitted bowl. I mean, I thought I'd get in. I was looking for a new, I was stuck. I was looking for a new art form. So a friend said, like, why don't you do, that's hours and hours of machine knitting to create a machine knitted bowl. I didn't like the noise, so it wouldn't be a creative project for me anymore. So tying it up, I did want to talk about artist block, why paint, and when is a painting finished, but I haven't had time. So maybe they can come in the questions. Thank you for listening.
So has anybody got any questions that they'd like to ask Diana?
How do you cope with artist block?
There you go. How do I cope with artist block? Well, that's been a very recent one actually, because I was gearing up to being 70. So I did the 100 portraits, I did my one-woman show, and I produced a big hardback book of Miss Smith. And then I thought, what on earth next? And so I got quite depressed because I didn't have a project. And the way I got myself out of it is by actually forcing myself to go in my studio and actually saying, right, I'm going to go and do something. And I started, the first thing I did was I got some bits of some roof slates, roof tiles, and they've got holes in them. So they're little bits of slate. So I said, well, I've done painting on wood, why don't I paint something on slate? So I did a couple of little paintings of some flowers actually from my garden on these bits of slate, and then I thought, no, what I really need to do is I really want to work big. I've been doing all these tiny iPad drawings. I really need to get some painters and decorators brushes and paint big, and I've so far done 2 big landscapes. But it's a question of actually making an appointment with yourself. It's always, it seems to me the best thing to do is to say, right, on Tuesday at 10 o'clock I will go in my studio. I'll go there from 10 till 1, and even if I don't produce anything, that's my answer.
Okay.
Any more questions?
And with the Miss Smith show,
Yeah.
did you create that just on your own, or how did you devise it?
With great difficulty.
Yeah.
I find it very difficult to memorise things, and I wanted to have some improvisation in it. What I had was an amazing friend who is a therapist and she believes in Miss Smith. I didn't believe in Miss Smith enough to know that I could get away with doing a 1-hour one-woman show, which I did, and it went pretty well. She said, right, come and practice it in my house once a week, which is what I did for nearly 9 months, the birthing process. And another thing that I feel about creativity is I've got 2 slogans. One is creativity for survival, and the other one is from blunder to beauty. So most times when I'm working on something, it goes through transition, like with giving birth. And I've learnt to accept that now, and to know that it doesn't mean it's going to not work out, is to just keep going, and it always evolves into something.
So that was like a weekly appointment for 9
Yeah.
months.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing.
Say more about creativity for survival and why paint.
Why paint has been difficult for me recently because I've got so many paintings in my house, and I'm not so good at having exhibitions and stuff, although I've done Somerset Art Week for years, and in the good old days you used to make £2,000 doing Somerset Art Week, and nowadays it ain't quite like that. I don't know why people aren't buying art so much. I'm sure people aren't buying art. People can't afford to buy art so much, and I don't want to fill my house with more and more stuff. So but why paint is because it makes me feel good. It makes me feel good to create something, and helps me justify my existence. So I suppose that's my answer.
Can I ask you, because I used to teach art, and parents used to come up and say to me, probably like your school, well, she does art, sure nothing she can do with it. I mean, which seems to me a remarkably stupid thing to say, but I mean, have you ever run into that attitude with people talking about their young nieces, nephews, grandchildren, children doing art? I mean,
No point to study art.
yeah, because I mean, you wouldn't have a career. And I mean, now it seems to be so fantastically obvious that there's more careers doing that than there are in most things.
Exactly.
I mean, it's
No, I don't come. I
more
don't think those are the sort of people that I'd like to hang out with.
well, it's my friend's generation. I mean, my generation, I'm an older person, obviously, and I suppose it was much more the attitude in the 50s and 60s.
Well, it was all, you know, I wanted to go to drama school, and my parents said, no, you need to go to university. It's the same kind of thing, isn't it?
It is exactly that. I'm just interested that you'd had this doing French. I mean, I know several people who, two nieces, both into the academic subjects, and they're both artists now. And it just seems to be a pity they didn't have the fun of being an art student as well. Yet, on the other hand, I agree that they muck you up quite often in art schools.
I don't know, because I didn't go to
Well, no,
one.
but you said you met all these people doing that.
Yeah, and they were sort of,
being mucked up by their art college.
yeah, so they needed the therapy to get over it.
Absolutely, I take that point too.
Anyone else?
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Hello. You've said several times about how you need different things, different medium, different forms to keep you stimulated, to keep you interested. And you talk about your hobbies. I mean, how anybody can actually find room and time to do all the things you do is amazing to me.
Jack of all trades, master of none.
Well, I don't know
That's the
about that.
downside.
So when you, I was struck with one of your vases, beautiful vase.
Oh, that was a fantastic project. The big vase. It's about that
Yeah.
big. It's smoke fired in a dustbin. That was Pauline Watson's inspiration. Wonderful Pauline Watson, who worked at Stowe College. And
So
died last
my
year.
question is a bit silly, I don't perhaps, but are you ever anxious that if you try something out, you might get sort of absorbed in it and forget something that you're doing that you feel you should be doing?
I don't feel I should be doing anything.
No.
I think this connects with the artist block idea. Actually, one way of getting through the artist block is to do something new, or to learn something new, or to learn a new skill, and start that can break the pattern where you're stuck with what you were doing.
Mm.
Miles Davis said something. I wanted to look up the quotation, but it's something about a true artist keeps changing. You know, keeps changing with the times, keeps having new ideas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's it's always good to explore something new. Can open up in a whole new territory of interest and inspiration.
Okay, thanks.
One more question? And then we'll sort of become informal and you can continue to ask her questions, but more informally. Anybody else got something they'd like to share with everybody?
I would like to say one other thing, actually, which is that friends have honoured Miss Smith. This is my friend Anne Liddell, who's an artist, who this is called Miss Smith Gets Lost in the Woods and Becomes a Wise Old Bird. And I have loved the way other people have taken Miss Smith on. People used to always tell me, why don't you do Miss Smith doing such and such? And my dear friend Kiki, who made this for me, which is Miss Smith Rocks, a little embroidery. And that's just really nice that other people have taken on the idea, that they've understood who she is. Thanks.
So I would just like to say thank you so much, Diana, for your talk. And let's give her And just to say that we are really hoping to continue this. We're going to be closed probably January and February, but in March. So there will hopefully, if we can find the funding, because up until now these talks have been supported by the gallery and we need to find some other funding. So, but from March we will continue, and the theme will be art making and nature, the relationship between nature and art.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be finding artists who are doing that sort of work, and so please come. Okay, thank you. And there is tea, isn't there, Kim?
There is.
There
I'm
is
going to
tea,
come and turn the
which we're
coffee
going to-
machine on in just a
Yes,
moment.
yes.
If you give me 5 minutes to
Yeah.
pack down the thing,
Yeah.
you're all welcome
Yes,
to
if
have tea
everybody
and
sort of
coffee on the house.
moves out and then you can move back in.
I do have some things for sale on the table.